Ron is the Hunt Research Director at the National Alliance for Caregiving. Dr. Cothran is a nurse scientist and a board certified gerontological clinical nurse specialist. And as the NAC's research director, Dr. Cothran helps to elevate national family caregiving research by strategically developing and guiding NAC research initiatives, including the landmark Caregiving in the US report, which is available online for anybody that hasn't seen it, leading a national multi-sector and multidisciplinary network of caregiving experts across the lifespan and condition, as well as representing NAC in public meetings and professional research forums to highlight research priorities and ongoing work. And so Dr. Cothran has this really exciting new role of having access to tons of caregiving related research that's not just limited to Alzheimer's disease. So folks that are interested in more of that, not only will she make her slides available at the end, but we'll also provide her contact information if that's of interest to you. So welcome, Fawn, and thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, thank you for the introduction. And I will just say again publicly, thank you again for the invitation. Very, very happy to speak. So I will start sharing my screen. All right. All right, I just need to move you all around a little bit. All righty. All right, so I accidentally jumped ahead a slide. All right, well, first of all, I just want to say thank you again. I'm going to be talking to you today about research at the National Alliance for Caregiving, and just really discussing the priorities and opportunities. So with that, I have one objective, which is essentially to describe the current research priorities and opportunities that we have right now. And as Dr. Robinson Lane mentioned, we do have a lot of data. So even if you're interested in something else, it's kind of maybe a peripheral interest, there may be something else that you might be interested in our data is public. So looking forward to sharing all of that information with you. Now, before I dive in, I do want to share some general background about our organization. We are a membership-based organization established in 1996, focused on building health, wealth, and equity for America's 53 million caregivers. We are comprised of more than 60 organizational members, including patient advocacy groups, health systems, private payers, and drug developers. In addition to that, we have an advocacy network of over 80 state, local caregiving coalitions and caregiving advocates, which I hope to tap into this a little bit later on in terms of why that's important that we have these state and local representatives in our membership. We have 4 core strategies in advocacy, research, and innovation, as well as thought leadership. I will focus on the research strategy, which is to elevate family caregiving work through credible, transformative, original research, providing data to researchers, and leading a national network of caregiving experts. The work of the National Alliance for Caregiving envisions a society that values, supports, and empowers all family caregivers across chronic condition and lifespan to thrive at home, work, and life. Now, I'm using the raised definition of family caregiver just to put us all on the same page, where a family member or an individual who has a significant relationship with and who provides a broad range of assistance to an individual with a chronic or other health condition, disability, or functional limitation. And I also want to make note that we define family, or family is defined very broadly to include legal, biological, as well as families of choice. All right, so with that backdrop, I will go into some of the priorities that we have going on right now surrounding our research. So we have 4 overarching organizational priorities, which include healthcare access and integration, where we catalyze system change to ensure the healthcare ecosystem recognizes and addresses the complex medical and mental health needs of family caregivers and integrates them into healthcare delivery and medical product development. We are also focused on economic justice to advance public policy that promotes workplace and economic equity throughout the lives of family caregivers. In addition, public health and community supports, which drive coordination and capacity building to integrate family caregivers into our nation's public health infrastructure, disaster preparedness efforts, and social services infrastructure, identifying and addressing gaps along the way. And then last but not least, we have building equity, which is also one of our priorities, as we want to champion research and practice change to address the systemic inequities that family caregivers experience across the lifespan. Now, having shared our organizational priorities, our main research priority is caregiving in the US. This report comes out roughly every 5 years. So our most recent iteration is 2020, and we are preparing for 2025. This report, Caregiving in the US, is the NAC's flagship data project. It is developed in partnership with AARP. It is the most cited research on family caregiving across the lifespan and across condition, providing the data needed to understand and address the complex and changing needs of unpaid family caregivers. Now, because of the focus of this group, some of you may already be familiar with either this work or some of these findings, but I'm just going to run through and highlight just a few for you. So there are over 53 million unpaid family caregivers in the United States. The majority of caregivers are women. They identify as primary caregivers. They have an average age of 49 years, and 40% live with their care partner or care recipient. Family caregivers also provide an average of 23 hours a week of care, which is the equivalent of a part-time job, and they provide this care for an average of 4.5 years. And understandably, for this group, we know that the Alzheimer's caregiving trajectory tends to be a little bit longer, actually considerably longer in most cases. Now, family caregivers have a complex role in the care that they provide, which includes, but is not limited to, performing complex medical and nursing tasks, such as medication management, colostomy care, tube feedings, wound care, setting and attending appointments, performing care management, coordination and advocacy to ensure the needs of their family members are met, assisting with activities of daily living, such as bathing, feeding, or dressing, as well as instrumental activities of daily living, such as transportation, grocery shopping, or paying bills. And they provide emotional support on top of all of that. So given all of that, some of the trends that we're seeing when we've looked at our 2015 data and 2020 data is that as time goes on, care responsibilities are increasing as more caregivers are caring for more people. Care coordination is becoming more difficult. And caregivers are in high intensity situations. And the way that we have looked at this is in terms of the ADL and IADLs, as well as their hours of care. We created a formula for that in our data. So it's getting intense. And so taken all together, caregiving is becoming more prevalent, it's more complex, it's intense, and it's more inequitable. So I'll shift just a little bit because I mentioned that caregiving in the US is our most cited research on family caregiving. And as I mentioned earlier, also that we do this roughly every 5 years. The last iteration was 2020. And so now with the 2025 version coming, I wanted to just share our timeline and where things are for this year, which is really the planning and priority setting. And then next year is when we will launch data collection and analysis, and 2025 will be the final report writing and release. Generally, it happens in the fall, but my understanding is that we may be aiming for a summer release, but it just depends. But you can be sure to be looking for this data. And so again, if you want to be thinking about looking at trends, you would have 2025, you would have 2020, and you would have 2015, as well as some previous data points. Now, because NAC has a commitment to look at caregiving across lifespan and condition, we will continue to incorporate an equity lens in our work that reflects our nation and the diverse communities of caregivers. So some steps that we are taking based on lessons that we've learned to ensure we are responsive as an organization in our research include reaching out which we want to understand caregiving needs. And so we want to identify and engage community members, community-based organizations, as well as local and national services or organizations that serve and or are members of the community and are already doing the work. So one of the things that we're well aware of is it's not enough to rely on narratives such as hard to reach, but we take that responsibility very seriously, that it's up to us to establish those mutual partnerships in order to start that planning process from the beginning, in order to include culturally relevant and appropriate outreach and engagement. And we want to invest in the time and the funding to support the infrastructure of our community-based partners, because essentially we understand that this work can't be done without those who have already been doing the work and are already doing the work already. So we want to make sure that we're leveraging that, but doing it from the beginning and not as an afterthought. So I will say that we may not get it right, but we are committed to doing better. And that is something that we're really implementing for the 2025 version. We also want to foster equitable relationships while upholding principles of justice. So in terms of inclusion, from the beginning, like I said, we're developing practices and methodology that are inclusive of diverse groups, and we want to collaborate on best practices from the beginning. Again, not as an afterthought, because we want this work to be impactful, collaborative, supportive, culturally responsive, and sustainable. In terms of segmentation and intersectionality, segmentation as we define it are the identities that may exist within the larger groups or within group differences. We actively engage with communities that have been historically excluded, overlooked, or underrepresented, and we're very intentional in our work to address and understand needs and preferences. Similarly, we are mindful of intersectionality and the caregivers who occupy more than one identity. And again, these are steps that we're taking for the 2025 version. So again, as you're thinking about data and questions that you may want to be asking of the data, keeping this in mind, these are things that we're incorporating moving forward. Now, as many of you know, caregivers play an active and critical yet often invisible role. So here I'll highlight some implications to justify our commitment to equity and our approach to this work. In terms of research, we are focusing on research that explores diverse caregiving communities with more intention through intersectional lenses, mixed methods that provide context to caregiving beyond the numbers, as well as team science approaches to address the complexities of caregiving, because caregivers can't afford to be examined in these silos anymore. In terms of advocacy, we want to continue to advocate for policies that directly support caregivers and system change, centering perspectives that warrant closer examination and understanding to disrupt the status quo. For our policy pieces, we want to catalyze policies that guide federal funding priorities for caregiving research. And then for practice, we want to incorporate and empower caregivers as the expert partners they are in order to enhance the quality of life for the person living with a chronic condition, who can inform the realities and opportunities of the prescribed care regimens. So based on the societal landscape since 2020, for 2025, there are some priority areas that we plan, as we're planning and priority setting for this year. There are some areas that have emerged, which include climate change, COVID-19, equity, caregiver health, and wellness. Now, again, this is in partnership with our collaborators with AARP. And so while these are priority areas, we may end up limiting to certain areas or not asking as many questions, but this is something that we see a need and we want to be responsive to that need. Okay, so all of that I've highlighted with caregiving in the US as our priority, but another priority for us is the national strategy to support family caregivers. So the national strategy represents the first time a broad cross-section of the federal government has collaborated with the private sector on a response to the long-standing national need for a comprehensive system of family caregiver support. The national strategy includes nearly 350 actions that the federal government can take to support family caregivers, and more than 150 actions that can be adopted at additional levels of government and across the private sector to begin to build a national infrastructure, ensuring that family caregivers have the resources they need to maintain their own health, their well-being, and financial security while providing crucial support for others. Now, although the national strategy does outline the 350 actions that I just mentioned, the federal legislative and regulatory bodies that are able to take some of these actions to provide relief, unfortunately, this RAISE process actually stops short of resourcing these actions and of setting time-bound and measurable goals related to implementation. So as a result, with funding from the John A. Hartford Foundation, we are launching and have launched a campaign to accelerate the implementation of the national strategy to support family caregivers and to strengthen federal level coordination needed to support the 53 million caregivers in the United States. And this is done with the original envisionment of the RAISE Family Caregiver Act. And so through this work with all of our partners and sponsors listed here, we have 3 goals: to mobilize and align, to educate and energize, as well as raise awareness. All right, so I've shared our priorities, and now I'm going to shift into some of the opportunities, which I'm sure, if I can overstate like that, that this is the highlight for most folks that are here today. So again, in addition to Caregiving the US, which is our flagship report, we do have several reports that cover 3 areas in general. We've looked at chronic conditions, we've looked at cost and impact, and we look at special populations. So just to provide a few examples, some of our condition-specific reports include dementia caregiving, which was done in 2017, and cancer caregiving, which was done in 2016. And the cancer caregiving, both of those reports were based off of Caregiving in the US 2015 data. So we're actually hoping to update the 2020 data for an Alzheimer's disease report, but certainly for 2025 as well. But again, depending on the questions that you may have, this data is available for you to start looking at and answering your own questions, but we also have reports that have been generated based on this data. So some of examples of our special population reports include our 2021 Caregiving in a Diverse America, which was based on the 2020 data. On pins and needles, which is also similar to the other 2 reports that I mentioned in the previous slide. Those were based on the 2015 data as well. And again, I would encourage you to go to our website to see these and other reports because they do cover a variety of topical content areas that we've produced. And before anyone may ask, where do you go? How do you get to it? So that's what I'll talk about now, which is just where to go on our website. And so caregiving.org is our website address. And so I encourage you to look around on the research section for a variety of different reports. And I do want to say that one of our strategies, which I mentioned earlier, is to make sure that we provide data to researchers. And as I alluded to earlier, this data is all free. It's publicly available. It's free to download. All you need to do is have your questions that you want to ask of the data, essentially. And so because it's publicly available, you can download it. You can analyze it, and then you can see a few examples of some of the data that we have. I've been in this role for about 18 months, and so we're still updating things that I've noticed that are missing. So actually, this picture isn't even an indication of all of the data that we have. So our website is being updated. So continue to pay attention to our website because those changes are coming, but this is what you can see that's available now. So another opportunity that may be of interest is the NAC Research Collaborative, or the NAC's Research Collaborative, which is recently relaunched. So this is our national expert peer caregiving network of expert caregiver researchers across the country. This collaborative is a hub for connecting multiple disciplines and multiple sectors of experts through coordinated research opportunities and learning initiatives. The collaborative includes over 60 members representing a national network of caregiver researchers that touch on various economic, social, and cultural needs and concerns of caregivers across lifespan and condition. Connecting these various fields and sectors, the collaborative focuses on translating research into advocacy and innovation for sustainable impact. The collaborative meets quarterly for 90 minutes with a focus on caregiving in the US. In between meetings, we also share monthly email updates that include updates with the organization, meetings, as well as funding and advocacy opportunities. The mission of the collaborative is to catalyze collaboration, to influence policies and promote programs in order to improve the lives of family caregivers. So in addition to the email updates that we have in between our meetings, as I mentioned, we're working on updating our website. And so we're also highlighting the work of our collaborative members. And so we're encouraging those members to let us know of recent publications, news articles, upcoming presentations, or op-eds, anything that they've done in order to amplify and disseminate that work through our social media channels, as well as on our website. And so having said that, if the collaborative is of interest to you, please feel free to email me. My address is Fawn, F-A-W-N, @caregiving.org. And I would be happy to share additional information as you think about whether that would work for you or your interests and your schedule. So this is essentially what we have going on now. And actually, as I realized that I may have flown through that a little quicker than I had anticipated, I will leave you with my final quote as I conclude, which is from former First Lady Rosalind Carter. There are only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need caregivers. And I think what the takeaway is from this is that caregivers are really a part of our society at this point, have always been. Unfortunately, they've been hidden or invisible, and we really want to highlight how important they are. And so the questions that you have, the work that you're doing, whatever we can do to support what you're doing, we want to be able to do that. And so with that, thank you. And I guess we'll take questions if there are any, which hopefully there are, and I'll be happy to answer.
Thanks, Fawn. That was really fantastic. Can you talk a little bit more about the Research Collaborative and what sorts of projects have been coming out of there, or what sorts of possibilities are available for folks?
Sure. So the Research Collaborative, as I mentioned a little earlier, it's been relaunched. So what it was doing before, I'm not really totally sure about, but what we're doing right now is we're really focusing on caregiving in the US. So the Research Collaborative is truly bringing together, we're discussing the methodology. So while we have a steering committee to really guide the work, the Research Collaborative is helping to do the work to make sure that that work gets done. Plus, we have work groups within those groups that may have additional interests. So for example, there are those that are interested in youth caregiving, for example, or cancer caregiving. And so we have that opportunity for those folks to connect together to be able to advance whatever interests they may have. And as an organization, if there's a way for us to support that, we do aim to do that. But essentially, right now, because of the focus on Caregiving 2025, that's what the Research Collaborative is doing. We're meeting and we're discussing what's happening with the report, what's happening with analyses, what's happening with how we're going to launch. I hope that is helpful.
It does. And so has the survey already been finalized for Caregiving 2025, or is there still time to get in on that?
No, there's still time. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No, it has
So if
not
you've
been
got
finalized.
questions that you want to make sure get a part of that, then that would be a great thing to do, is to join that collaborative to get in while there's still the opportunity.
Yeah, I think we have another meeting coming up with AARP, and we actually hope to have those that we really want to have it done by the end of summer for sure.
Okay.
So, but yes, please. And what I'm learning in this role is that everything costs money, right? So, it's as you add questions, it's how much longer does that survey take? Who's going to still be able to continue it? And what do we take away if we end up adding something? Sometimes that's a piece of it, but absolutely, by all means, please do join if that's of interest.
And can you put your email in the chat for folks, please?
Yes, I can.
Were there any other questions for Dr. Cothran?
I'll jump in with a question, Sharia. This is Amanda. Hi, Fawn. Yeah, I'm glad. This is
Oh,
great, Fawn. I didn't realize until I saw the advertisement that you'd made this move. So I'm excited to see you in this role. Yeah. I guess my question was about the publicly available data. Is there any oversight in terms of publication? Researchers might be interested in using that data. Like, do research questions need to be approved?
So our data is available for the public. So if, for example, if you are interested in developing your own survey, for example, and there were questions that we've used that you would like to also include, you could do that and make sure that you attribute it to us. And in terms of publications, we are trying to do a better job of finding out how often our data has been cited and used, because we're hearing so much about how people are publishing our data. So I hope that answers, but feel free to let me know if I can clarify that more.
No, that's great. Thank you, Fawn.
No problem. And again, good to see you or hear
Yeah.
your voice.
You
to
too.
reconnect.
I know we
I have a
do.
question. Oh, sorry.
Yes, please. No apologies needed.
So I'm Sumaya Zimami. I'm a PhD student at the University of Michigan. Currently, I'm working on secondary data analysis paper, and I use the Caregiving in the United States Dementia 2011 data from your website, but I'm having a hard time to find the report for that data set.
I don't think there's a report on that particular data set. So the only report we have is the 2017 report, because that was based on the 2015 data. So the only thing that you would probably be able to access is the data that you already have access to from 2011. Reports aren't always done every single year, because it depends on what the priority areas have been identified in order to do the secondary analysis or other reports. And so that one hasn't been done, but I think that moving forward, that is something that we see a true need for. So there will be more moving forward.
All right, thank you.
But sorry about that. Nothing from the previous years.
Any other questions?
Well, I can certainly say, I mean, I know that I ran through that, but I can certainly say that as questions come up, I've placed my email in the chat. You can always email me. I do have additional information about the Research Collaborative. We have a one-pager that I'd be happy to share if folks are interested in just in hearing a little bit more or seeing about, you know, again, whether this is the time, whether what we're focusing on fits. You know, you can make that decision and just keep me posted. But that's information I can certainly share. And again, it's just an email away to, you know, ask additional follow-up questions. But this is a great time because, again, 2025 is on the horizon. And so in addition to this new data that will be coming, we also have these data from these other previous years. So there may be a question that you can look at again, maybe identifying different trends to see what's happening, and that will be a ripe opportunity depending on what your questions are.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, then we'll thank everybody for attending. It's getting a little noisy here. I'm in a hallway over at ISR.
Oh,
but
funny.
again, we thank you all for participating. The presentation will be available. We'll send out a link if there's anybody that you know will be interested in this information. And then Dr. Cothran also put her email in the chat. And then also there is a evaluation that will be helpful if you would fill out. So thanks again, everybody. Enjoy the time that you've received back and have a great rest of your week.
Yes. Good to see all my familiar faces. Take care, everyone.